of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please. Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Clark?
Here.
Councilmember Johnson? Absent. Councilmember Mortensen? Here. Councilmember Spear?
Here.
Councilmember Castle? Absent. Councilmember Neal?
Present.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is recognitions, chief citations, and recognition of the interdepartmental collaboration and arresting a serial graffiti suspect. We'll turn it over to you, Chief Brandt.
Actually, first, Mayor, if I may, I just want to introduce this item too, because I'm excited about the opportunity we have to honor some excellence cross-departmental collaboration. And I will now turn it over to Chief Brandt to explain why and give some really well-deserved recognition. Chief.
Thank you, Jim. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. Rick Brandt, Chief of Police. So we're taking this opportunity to recognize some employees in the police department and public works who took the initiative to work collaboratively between departmental lines to help us catch what we term as a serial graffiti artist who was causing us all kinds of grief for about 6 months of the year. So that being said, I'd like to call up the folks that I'm recognizing. Jason, is Jason Peppis here yet? No. And Andrew and Efren and the officers, Dan, Officer McDaniel and Todd. Who are we missing?
Cody and
Cody. All right. We're missing a couple. Come on up, guys. If you just kind of line up over here on my left. You can stand there and look pretty for pictures while I talk. Keep going. Keep going. How are you? So just some real quick background. In January, we discovered a new artist in the neighborhood, been tagging a lot of our properties. Over about 6 months, we had, I think, a total of 16 different police reports taken from all over the city. He wasn't localized. And Officer Todd Ediger kind of took the bull by the horns on this and reached out to Public Works, and he spoke with Efren, he spoke with Andrew Pendergrast and asked, hey, can you guys help us? We want to try to set up some surveillance and see if we can catch this guy. So these folks jumped right in and they helped us set up a surveillance camera, motion-activated surveillance camera in a location. And not just that, they also went back and checked that location very frequently, and they would let us know, hey, there's new graffiti. They'd pull the card, the data card, turn it over to PD in hopes that we'd catch this guy actually doing the tagging. And after some time, their efforts paid off. We had our community service technician, Cody Thomason, looking through all the photographs, and he found what looked like a suspect coming up in the area. So he distributed his picture and gave it to patrol, and everybody's pretty tuned in to get this kid because of the amount of, well, he's causing us a lot of paperwork for one thing, but the number of calls we were on. So I think it was Officer McDaniel and Officer Schisler and Officer Peppis were out in the field when they spotted somebody that looked like this kid, and they contacted him and did some good old-fashioned police work. They sort of leaned on him, and they found some evidence on him that may have connected him to some of the graffiti. So they presented him with some overwhelming evidence, including some photographs and some other things that they found in his possession, and got him to confess to these various vandalisms. So at the end of the day, what we did was we got the graffiti artist, cleared up 16 cases, and he caused about $6,000 worth of damage to city property. So we're going for restitution in that regard too. So I think what this exemplifies is not only our dependency as police officers on our community, the eyes and ears to help us, deal with problems and solve crimes, but the willingness of other departments to step up and help us accomplish a common goal. And the folks on the line work really well together. Where we usually run into roadblocks is when the managers get involved, right? Supervisors start managing this stuff. Well, that just wasn't the case. Supervision within the police department turned them loose. Scott and his crew and Randy said, yeah, go for it. Let's help out the police department and get this guy. So their efforts paid off. I'm proud of the work they did. It was fantastic and saved us probably a lot more vandalism in the future. So, gentlemen, thank you for the work you did. So what I have here are, we just have a number of Chief Citation Awards for each of these fine gentlemen. And what it says is, to all who shall see these presents, greetings, This is to certify that the Chief of Police of the City of Evans has awarded the Chief Citation Award to Andrew Pendergraft for distinguishing and meritorious service to the Evans Police Department and the citizens of the City of Evans. Thank you so much. Thank you. And one for Eflin. You guys, great job. Thank you. Todd, you sort of kick this thing off. Welcome, sir. And Jason, thank you so much for taking me on. Last but not least, your job is over. Thanks, Julie.
Chief, thank you to you and your police department and to the Public Works Department. On behalf of the council, it is fantastic seeing different departments within our city working together to accomplish a single goal. That is really cool to see. I say it all the time. I do believe personally that our police department is the best around. I think we are fantastic. You guys do an outstanding job. I'm not sure, when you signed up to be police officer, going after graffiti is the number one thing you thought you were going to be doing, but it is very, very important. The look of our city to the city council and to its citizens is right up there with, that's what people see when you're driving down the streets. You don't want to see this stuff we're looking at up here. So while it's not, the pretty case, it's a very important case. So thank you guys for everything you did. That's fantastic work.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Next item on the agenda is audience participation. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the city council on any item not on the agenda this evening? Please step up to the podium, state your name and address.
Patricia Ulrich, 1720 32nd Street, Unit 25, Evans, Colorado, 80620.
Thank you.
And I was here 4 weeks ago with Chapel Commons. There was a few ladies with me that day. They're both not feeling very well. My husband came with me today. But we wanted to know if you guys made any kind of headway as to any kind of resolution for the noise and the excessive traffic there on 32nd Street, and 17th Avenue.
Sure. I am going to turn it over to staff, but on a note on that, I do want to mention that myself, the city manager, and the chief of police, and I think Councilmember Neo, we did drive over there, and we do understand there is the problem. So we're with you on that. As far as the resolution, I'm going to turn it over to staff. I think we're looking for Randy.
Looking for the police chief, Rick Brandt, who was working on the
Here he
different
comes right
strategies.
here. Chief, we steal you for a second?
If you have any updates on the intersection, the traffic issues at 17th Avenue and 32nd Street, Chapel Commons area that we had talked about.
Sure.
Just
Yeah,
strategies.
we did put out to patrol to increase enforcement and visibility out there. I don't know if we got the speed trailer out there yet, but it will be due on rotation. We rotate them around to different locations. I just talked to somebody else this morning or this afternoon about the same strip of roadway. So the short answer is we're doing the visibility thing. They slow down when they see us. When we're not there, we're probably dealing with the same thing, but we are trying to raise awareness in that area. I can't tell you how many tickets we've written or anything else. I don't have that data.
Okay, is there any way that you guys could, unless they're bobtailing, according to this gentleman that live over there, speed bumps or?
Sure, we will absolutely look into all those things for you. We'd love to get your phone number, and we'll have you give that to the city manager before you leave. There's a lot that goes into putting in a speed bump somewhere and changing a speed limit. There's a lot that goes into that. So the first step I know we're going to try is the speed sign. Chief, I'm not sure what you call that, but it's the big white sign that tells you how fast you're going when you're driving down that street. And that also, Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it tracks the speeds of the cars going by, so we'll actually be able to get some data.
It'd be nice if
they'd
they'd take a picture of their license plates.
That would be fantastic. So if you don't mind, if you could get your phone number to either Chief Brandt or to our city manager, Jim Becklenberg, this evening, we would definitely get in touch with you with the next steps.
Okay?
And just on I did speak to the chief earlier regarding that, because I do live off of 32nd Street as well, and my house butts right up against 32nd Street, and I notice it all the time as well. They use it as a drag strip, they see
They
that long
do.
straightaway, even though it's 30, as soon as they pass that crosswalk, they floor it. As soon as they pass the four-way stop going down 17th to the next, they get on it all the time, and I usually notice it more towards the evening. I was telling the chief that over this weekend, it seemed to be a lot worse. I see people trying to cross this crosswalk right there, because that's where my house is, and I see kids trying to cross, and they get halfway through, and here comes a car going, kids stop in the middle of the road because the car doesn't want to stop at the crosswalk. So I feel your pain, and hopefully we'll get it resolved.
Well, I think they like that four-way stop sign. That they just like to romp on it.
They do.
When they pull away. And when they it, when they're well, but all day long, every day.
I have a question, ma'am. Did you happen to hear the fireworks going off last night? Because when the second one went off, I identified where it was and knew the perpetrator, probable perpetrator, is you got to catch him in the act. And jumped in my car with my dash cam, and the police were responding. And the officer told me later that he had heard it while he was on patrol somewhere in the city, and he was right on it. So I was very glad to see that. But you have to catch him in the act before you get cite him and haul him into court.
Well, I'm happy to see that these guys are getting these graffiti people, because the white fences, that whole street, it's terrible.
Looks terrible.
It's bad right there. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Ma'am, I'm gonna get my car here as well. I just looked at
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to address City Council on any item not on the agenda this evening? Seeing none, are there any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes to the agenda.
Thank you.
I move to approve the agenda.
A second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next item, consent agenda. Approval of the August 20th, 2019 City Council meeting minutes.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Item 8, new business. Item A, consideration of agreements necessary for implementation of Tuscany non-potable irrigation project. We'll hear from staff.
Thank you, Mayor. This item tonight follows on the most recent of your work sessions on this topic on August 5th, when the council heard a pretty extensive overview and update on the project and the discussions with the neighborhood and some of the other property owners involved. That presentation also included a budget summary of the whole project as it stands now, and also some next steps. I say that because tonight we're focusing on the action items that the council needs to consider if it is your interest to move forward with the project, as was your direction several weeks ago. And those are 3 different agreements. So my remarks tonight will give a brief high-level overview of the project for anyone who in the audience or the council who hasn't kind of heard the whole story. And then we'll kind of focus on those agreements that we're seeking council's consideration of tonight. So this project goes back about probably 10 to 15 years, depending on which point you kind of count as the start. I'll talk to some background in a moment, but if we start with why the city is involved and why we are interested in facilitating the project. If we move forward, the project would enable the city to conserve approximately 100 acre-feet of water, which is now potable water being used to water lawns in Tuscany, both current Tuscany and the planned final development in Tuscany. Greeley, with whom we have our treatment contract, charges us for capacity in their plant. And our contract has some various thresholds of when we have to pay for new capacity. And by shifting this potable demand of about 100 acre feet to non-potable, untreated water for irrigation, we have a better chance of delaying our next payment for this threshold. It would enable us to have a better chance of paying for that next capacity threshold with new development instead of paying for it from our current ratepayers. Also, this gives us an opportunity to resolve a long time, dispute might be a strong word, but I think make better a long time concern for the Tuscany neighborhood, both those who have lived there a long time and those who have moved in more recently. There's been lots of tension over time over this issue. And finally, just to summarize, if we build the system, the residents of Tuscany would receive the non-potable, untreated water for irrigation and pay significantly lower rates for irrigation, even as they pay off the system. We're expecting at least 75% of residents who currently use the potable water to see savings every year after just 5 years. And I believe 2/3 will see savings even in the first year. That's our reason. A little bit of background. The developer of Tuscany went bankrupt. Significant portions of the infrastructure were unfinished, including the non-potable water system. The system was planned but not completed. The houses in Tuscany are built with dual plumbing, pipes in the ground, which is good. So that way they would have 1 meter for the indoor use, 1 meter for the outdoor use. Since the bankruptcy happened and when we realized the non-pot system was not going to be built, the city made the decision to go ahead and supply its potable water system, had a cutover from the city's system into the non-potable system so that residents could water their lawn. And that's been the practice now for probably more than 10 years. So that's been the practice. One of the hurdles we've had is that the land needed to complete the system with the pond system is owned by a private third party. That private third party has had their own economic interests and disappointments with Tuscany and has had some insistence for compensation for that property. Probably 2 years ago now, the city had a work session on this topic and heard about the economics of saving the potable water, knew about the issues and the concerns of the residents and said, hey, let's talk about this. What if the city can front the cost, get the system built, and then over time, the residents can pay back the system and see savings while they're paying it back so that we can get this issue resolved. At this point, as council heard in the August 5th work session, the total project cost is estimated at about $1.3 million for the land acquisition, site cleanup, design of the system, construction of the system, water carriage to the site from the main GLIC ditch, and also long-term water acquisition to make the kind of system whole from what was not dedicated up front from the developer. And finally, the main goal is to shift the non-potable irrigation in Tuscany so that all Evans, so that the residents of Tuscany have very direct savings from non-potable irrigation, and all Evans residents can hopefully save money by not having to pay those threshold capacity charges as soon. That's the background. So tonight we're looking at just a few of the components that we've been talking about. We're looking at the purchase agreement that would enable the city to acquire the land on which the non-potable ponds are located. That would help the city to move forward with owning and maintaining this system, making it part of our long-term, of our overall non-potable irrigation system. That price negotiated subject to council approval for Tract O is $257,000. The next item is the water purchase agreement, also from DG Holdings, who own that Tract O. They received the property and this share of water through the bankruptcy proceedings related to the Tuscany developer. So we've done a lot of research, due diligence on the value of this specific water share, and we've negotiated, subject again to council's approval, a price of $90,000 for that water share. Just to give you a sense, that comprises around 20 acre-feet of water, which is about a fifth of the water for the whole project. So it's a significant way toward that total water goal that we've been talking about for the system. Then finally, we have to have an agreement with the farmer, Mr. Mike Wiedemann, who owns the farm to the south of Tuscany, south of 37th Street. Mr. Wiedemann has owned the main water carriage pipe that currently carries water from the main Greeley Loveland Irrigation Company, GLIC ditch, which is to the north of the property, carries water from that main ditch currently to Mr. Wiedemann's property which is across 37th Street. The original plan for this non-pot system contemplated using Mr. Wiedemann's pipe to convey the water through his pipe to Tract O. Our engineering staff has done a lot of calculation and negotiation with Mr. Wiedemann. We believe there is enough room in that pipe to carry his water and the city's water, so the city can avoid building its own pipe, which would have cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, by working with Mr. Wiedemann on a carriage agreement at the rate of $25 per acre foot per year. Plus the contract that you have in front of you agrees that the city will help with minor repairs up to $3,000 per year. So our cost for carriage will be between $2,500 and $5,500 per year. So those are the three items. I'll speak to each one of them for a moment. Tract O acquisition, as I said, our price is $257,000. This property, as you may know, is unique. It has very limited access and has some. It's covered with ponds, but also some land. But all parties realized that it didn't lend itself well to a traditional real estate appraisal process. So instead, after negotiating, they were looking for much more. We had been talking about much less. We looked at a just objective basis for valuing that parcel based on the assets that are located on the parcel. So we went back in the court documents and found an estimate of the cost that the owners of Tract O had to spend to essentially complete the existing infrastructure, pay some liens that had been left by the developer, about $412,000. And we simply took an accounting calculation to depreciate that value to 2019, and the result was $257,000. So we thought it was a good, objective way, again, of coming up with a value that, again, was, more than we wanted, less than what they wanted, but that could enable us to move forward. And so that's the value there. I will note the points on the slide, the green and the new note. Since the August 5th work session, staff has been working on the 2020 budget and had been looking at some of our other projects that might benefit from impact fees, our park development impact fees, which are paid by all properties developing in Evans. And we realized that the portion of Tract O that will be used for public open space and potentially a park someday, a very passive, low activity park, is eligible for use of those park impact fees. So this is a change from the August 5th work session where we had been showing the entire project and the entire purchase of Tract O be paid for by the project participants, the beneficiaries of the non-potable water system. Tonight, we're updating that recommendation with a calculation where essentially 52% of the Tract O property is comprised of land, not ponds. And so we're proposing that that portion be paid with by city impact fees that have been collected really for open space and park purchases. That's the $640. And then the remainder, which is 48%, and the portion of the property that is really the non-potable water system is $123,000. That's 48% of the total. So we do have this change in our recommendation where the cost for Tract O would be shared this way between the participants in the project who benefit and also the entire community who will have access to that open space and park. So that reduces the amount of the project paid for by the participants by $133,640. So I want to spend a minute on that. So just taking that concept to show the meaning, I've got the first two columns are from the August 5th work session where we were showing, for instance, for a single family home, the total cost that they would be paying for the project would be maximum $1,912 or $11 a month if you paid that over 15 years. Now the total per single family home is $1,716 and rounded to $10 a month. So it does save a little bit of cost there for homeowners. You can see the impact on multifamily households and the Monte Vista condos. Again, those are rounded figures, so there is a little savings from Monte Vista. It's just not showing up in the rounded $4. Last point here, this shows the updated total cost per project as we showed for single family home, $1,700. The annual cost is $114. If you look to the table on the right, that shows the projected savings and cost for once the system's installed, and it shows that for instance, high water users, that's like the 90th percentile of people watering their lawns currently with potable water. They'll save about $304 in the first year. As water costs will likely get more expensive, their savings per year could go up to about $600 per year. If you look at the median, the average water user, first year we think they'll save a little money, still savings, but that as potable costs go up and the non-potable presumably goes up slower, those households would see annual savings as well. And then low water users, in fairness, point out when you use very little water, this is about the 10% level of our water users. When you don't use much potable to start off, then you don't see much savings when you switch to the non-potable water. So there is a slight increase for those families who use very little water currently for those households. But the blue boxes on the left, we do anticipate with this model that households seeing savings in year one should be probably more than two-thirds, 65% of those single-family homes should see savings in the first year, with about 84% in 5 years. Next piece is the share of water. That's the one share of the 7 Lakes system that DG Holdings owns. As I mentioned, they were given this one share in the bankruptcy proceedings. When the city got into this research, we actually realized that the 7 Lakes Irrigation Company actually has this water still on its books, earmarked for use in Tuscany. One of the main factors in the value of this water is that it is not fully marketable on the market. It cannot be changed, as the term goes, adjudicated in water court for municipal use. It can only be used essentially for irrigation, which severely limits the value of the water. Based on the individuals we've spoken to with the GLIC water system and also our own water engineer, advice to us is that the current market value is about $90,000 of that share, compared to about $150,000 if it was able to be adjudicated or changed for municipal use. So that's how we got to that value. As I say, the water can be used for irrigation. So we think this is a really important opportunity to acquire that water. We did take this water share and the recommendation, and really this whole project, to the council's Water and Sewer Board, now actually 2 times in the last 6 months, and both times the Water and Sewer Board recommended approval of the project and also acquiring this share based on their knowledge of the water system. Finally, we talked about water carriage and conveyance. I won't repeat myself completely. The graphic on the slide isn't great for showing, but if you can see to the right of the purple, there's a yellow dashed line, and that shows the Wiedemann line coming down from the system to the north. And as I mentioned, the negotiated carriage agreement would be for a current, approximate market price for such agreements of $25 per acre foot per year, getting us to the $2,500 per year, plus some allowance for assisting with repairs. So, concluding my remarks, tonight we're asking council to consider approving the purchase agreement for Tract O and for the Seven Lakes water share. Your motion tonight would authorize the mayor to sign the purchase agreements. These are like the purchase contracts when you're buying a house, and then authorize the city manager to complete negotiations and sign any other paperwork that needs to be signed, and then approving the water carriage agreement for the amounts that we talked about. And with that, Mayor, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jim. Questions of staff?
It's just not really necessarily a question, more of a comment. I kind of have concerns about us taking $133,000 out of the park fund to save them a little bit of money for a small park that will possibly benefit the entire city, but probably won't be used by many residents except for the people in Tuscany. I just have a very difficult time saying, well, let's spend $133,000 out of that fund to help offset the cost for the residents in Tuscany.
I think we spent more than that on that pocket park that I haven't used it. I don't know if you've been over there using it. So I think that depending on where certain areas are, that, certain residents are going to be using the park. So, I guess that's not where I don't have a problem. I hear what you're saying.
But otherwise, I completely agree. It needs to get done, and, it definitely saves, the taxpayers and the community money in the long run, so we don't go over our cap. So, I'm all for it. I was just concerned about that $133,000 being spent out of the parks fund for.
I'm more concerned about what type of a park. Is it going to be manicured, or is it just going to be
No.
some wild habitat? So,
Native.
Grass mowed 3-4 times a year, like at least now. We don't have any plans or funding to improve it to real park
but it's
level
going to
service.
it's going to be cleaned up, and it's not going to be some brushy mess that
Correct.
small children and dogs and whatever can get lost in.
Right.
Okay, I mean, that's more my
Hoping we
concern.
can-
If it's going to be our city property, we need to at least maintain it.
No, I agree with that. No, just like I said, my concern is just spending that money for a park to help offset some of the costs for their non-pot system.
I have a different concern. Under 9 of the terms and conditions of the carriage agreement, it says that it shall be for a period of 1 year and shall be extended for consecutive 1-year terms unless notice of termination is provided. What happens if the carriage agreement is terminated by the holder of this? I'm assuming Mr. Wiedemann. How are we going to get our water, our non-potable water service to these people then?
Yes, we would have to probably construct a pipe then. I will tell you, that is the option. I will tell you that Mr. Wiedemann has expressed interest in selling us that pipe. And the project budget that you saw on August 5th actually has $50,000 earmarked for potential costs regarding either carriage or purchase of that pipe. And we think that it's probably wise for us to acquire that pipe if we can. So we're actually working on that right now. We hope to, as a practical matter, to come back to you soon with that as an option. But to your question, we would have a hard decision there if we had to build the pipe.
So, and I see that in the agreement too, you also have a little bit of the terms on the calling rights on the water. So I just wouldn't want him to, in a drought year, put the call on the water, and then, again, the city and the citizens are out of water.
Right. We have enough water in our non-potable water portfolio that if we had to, we could, cover that if that were to happen. As part of the due diligence looking at this opportunity, we have done the research again with GLIC, and the chances are remote that our call would not be honored in a drought year. Our rights are not as senior as the farmers,
Right.
but they're fairly secure.
Right.
I don't know.
The only thing I would add to that is that the city always has the ability to impose water restrictions as long as they're either system-wide within a system or city-wide. So I think that Jim's right, that the likelihood of us having that severe drought are not that great, but we've seen some pretty dry cycles over the last 50 years. So if that were to happen, then you might have to go to watering restrictions, but you're probably looking at those city-wide at that point.
Right. So, and then the other thing that I just want to be clear on is that, again, if Mr. Wiedemann sells this property, let's say in 6 months, that our agreement is going to transfer onto the purchasing party.
I think the agreement's assignable, but I don't know that it would automatically transfer.
Okay.
So that's something that we would certainly need to work with.
Yeah, again, I know that the property, I do believe, is for sale, and I would certainly hate, again, to go into this and then 6 months down the line, we've spent all this money and promised water to these people, and then again, the next owner doesn't want to enter into an agreement with us on carrying rights of the water.
Were there discussions on longer than a 1-year contract?
Well, if you go beyond the 1-year contract and you run into Tabor because it becomes a multi-fiscal year obligation, so that's why we had to make it terminable each year.
Other questions of staff?
How much notice do we get if, say, after a year they want to say, we don't want to move any further with this, or you need to build your own pipe, or you need to buy ours? How much notice do we get for that?
Yes, we've changed it to 10 months prior to the next termination date. That we actually have to have notice from them, so presumably it could go on longer than that if we don't hear within 10 months.
Unless he sells.
And in those 10 months, is 10 months enough time for us to get our pipe in the ground if we have to?
That was my next one.
It would be tight, but we would, get it done and resume service as soon as we could. And we wouldn't be charging residents, during that. Potables, yes, the water, if it were a number of months or that termination fell during a period when irrigation was happening. Again, it's four or so months of the year. We would still have access to a potable system for a temporary period.
Other questions?
Yeah, and so I do have a
Sure.
few more questions. So this is probably more for Scott. So it is, I guess I would say legal to bring this water in and have it held in a pond then?
Yeah, we did have Doug Seeley look at it from the engineering perspective and the regulations of Seven Lakes, and they said that the uses that we were proposing were permissible. Usually, generally, if you hold it, the rule of thumb in Colorado water law is that you can hold it for 48 hours without a storage right. So as long as you're circulating it within that 48-hour period, you're usually okay.
And then to be clear, so that everyone knows that over the winter months of non-potable usage, that these ponds will then be dry.
Yes, because the
There
ditch
won't be
will
any
be
groundwater
carrying
coming up.
water.
Right,
Right. There is still stormwater. I will
right.
disclosure. It's still all shared stormwater use if there is stormwater.
Any other questions? Not, I'd entertain a motion.
I have a comment?
You have,
May I have a comment?
That's what I meant by, are there any more questions?
Sorry. But, yeah, questions of staff. To me, there's always a difference between questions and comments. I would, all the parties to this are not satisfied, but I think it's been 15 years and it needs to be completed and done. And I share Councilmember Spears' concerns that after doing this, something could happen with our carriage agreement and we wouldn't be able to supply the water, which would leave us with egg on our face again. So I'm hoping that everything works out and we can get this done and the people will be supplied with water finally after 15 years for their irrigation.
Thank you, Fred. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion.
I move to approve the purchase agreement with DG Holdings for Tuscany Track O, the amount of $257,000, and authorize the mayor to sign the purchase agreement and the city manager to sign all substantial documents to complete the transactions. I also move to approve the purchase agreement with DG Holdings for Seven Lakes Water Share number 1288 in the amount of $90,000, and authorize the mayor to sign the purchase agreement and the city manager to sign all substantial documents to complete the transaction. And I move to approve the authorization to the mayor to sign the water carriage agreement with Mike Wiedemann for carriage of the city's water to Track O for the Tuscany non-potable irrigation system.
I'll second.
I second.
I have a motion and a second for the three suggested motions made by Mayor Pro Tem Clark. Scott, do I need to read all three of them again?
Well, I think you can do all three at one time because you wouldn't want to buy the share if you didn't have the property. So they are definitely connected contracts and they're contingent on each other. You may want to ask for public comment. I don't know that.
Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the council on this item? Seeing none, I have a motion and a second to approve the purchase agreement with DG Holdings for Tuscany Tract O in the amount of $257,000 and authorize the mayor to sign purchase agreement and the city manager to sign all subsequent documents to complete the transaction, and to approve the purchase agreement with DG Holdings for Seven Lakes Water Share 1288 in the amount of $90,000 and authorize the mayor to sign the purchase agreement and the city manager to sign all subsequent documents to complete the transaction, and to approve the authorize the mayor to sign the water carriage agreement with Mike Wiedemann for carriage of the city's water to Tract O for the Tuscany non-potable irrigation system. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is public hearing, new beer and wine city license for Sahara Nights at 3313 35th Avenue in Evans. And I will open the public hearing and hear from staff.
Thank you, Mayor. This is one of the city's duties spelled out in your municipal code. And our city clerk manages this process, and I will turn it over to Karen Frawley, our clerk, to lead through the staff presentation.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight we have before you a new beer and wine license for Sahara Nights, located at 3313 35th Avenue. Tonight you will be approving or denying this application based on 3 factors: the reasonable requirements of the neighborhood, the desires of the adult inhabitants of the neighborhood, and the moral character of the applicants. Speaking to the reasonable requirements of the neighborhood, the city currently has a total of 21 various liquor licenses, and within the 1-mile radius, there's 1 hotel restaurant, 1 club, 1 liquor store, and 3 fermented malt beverage licenses. The desires of the adult inhabitants of the neighborhood, the petition returned 95 signatures in favor of and no signatures opposing this application. When the police department conducted their background check, there was no information found on the applicants, providing the moral character of the applicants. Applicants have paid all state and city fees required. And since they did not choose to have a concurrent review, if the application is approved tonight, the license will be pending the state's review and approval. The applicants are here if there's any questions.
Sure, thank you. Next is for the applicant to present his position. Before he gets there, I do want to do full disclosure. I do know the applicant. I own a restaurant in town, and the applicant owns a business right next to him. So stating that, I do want to say that I do know him. It would not affect any decision I make, but I'd like to ask if there's anyone in the audience who wishes me to recuse myself on this item. Seeing none, does the applicant wish to present any other findings, or would you like us to wait for us to ask questions? Okay, he had told me beforehand that he was just going to wait till we ask questions. So, is there anyone in the audience who wants to show support of this issue? Seeing none, is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak in opposition of this issue? Assuming there is no rebuttal because there was none. Council, do we have any questions of the applicant or staff?
I have none.
Any other questions? No questions of the applicant or staff, so I will close the public hearing. Council discussion.
I believe this is pretty straightforward. We've had over 95 signatures in favor, none of them opposed. We haven't heard any opposition from the audience, so I'll support this.
Yeah, and the background check and everything looks good, so we're okay. I'm okay with it. Any?
Discussion, Fred?
No.
I think it'd be a great addition to the city. I'm all in favor of it, and I think it'll be great. If there's no other discussion, I'd entertain a motion.
I move for the approval of the beer and wine city license for Sahara Nights located at 3313 35th Avenue in Evans, Colorado.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the approval of the beer and wine city license for Sahara Nights located at 3313 35th Avenue in Evans, Colorado. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Thank you guys for being here. We're looking forward to it.
Good luck.
Item 9, report, city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Just 2 things tonight. I want to announce publicly and start the promotion for Evan's first State of the City address. Event is planned for September 26th at 7:30 a.m. Events being jointly sponsored by the City of Evans and the Evans Area Chamber of Commerce. The event will take place at the Riverside Library and Cultural Center. It's intended to be an opportunity for our mayor to give an update to the business community and the rest of the community on the work that Evans is doing, and talk about accomplishments, about upcoming plans, and just start to continue to build the relationship with the community. We'll also be probably launching and debuting some of the publication materials about the upcoming road tax, talking about the importance of that topic will be front and center, I'm sure. And we'll have opportunities to talk about a lot of the good work that this council and staff have been doing. So that's an exciting event. Finally, I just want to mention that we also have a neat volunteer project taking shape that will take place on September 11th. We have 15 AmeriCorps volunteers in service to America, or VISTA, if you've heard of the VISTA program, will be assisting with a day of service to benefit first responders. The VISTA volunteers will be removing brush at the west end of Riverside Park, which we know will have an impact on the park and also be, I think, a good way to honor first responders. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you, Jim. City Attorney.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. Just quickly, if there's anything in light of the legislative update that we talked about at the council workshop today that you want us to look into in terms of additions that you want to make to the Evans Code, let us know. Other than that, we've been spending a lot of time still on development agreements, and that's always a good thing. And then in the EQR Advantage Bank case, we're sort of in a lull right now. I don't anticipate anything will happen there probably for the next couple of months. And that's it.
Yeah, thank you. Next item on the agenda is audience participation. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address City Council on any item? Thank you all for being here. Meeting adjourned.